right, are you ready? This is the RR Show, and I am Vince, and we are going to be having a grand old time. We've got a really nice, longer grab bag episode. We're going to be doing Wedding Shaming, Entitled People, Neighbors from Hell, and 3 to wrap up the episode from Petty Revenge. So let us get into this episode of the RR Show with your pal here, Vince, right now. Our first story comes from r/wedding shaming, posted by user Madam Kitsune 98. Picture it. Rural Kentucky, 1992. Yeah. So the last post about the wedding with the bride and groom hotboxing in the limo inspired me to post the wedding disaster stories I have from the early 90s. And we all know that was 10 years ago, right? Right, you guys? Yes, I'm aware that was more than 30 years ago. You don't have to remind me. So the first wedding. Well, my 16-year-old friend was pregnant, knocked up in the family way. Not ideal. And she and her mother insisted she get married. Definitely not ideal. But church, wedding, and everything. And she asked a mutual friend to be her bridesmaid. And asked me to come, and yes, I'll be there, yay. This one was in 1991, by the way. The day of the wedding. Her mom calls and says, so, mutual friend's mom, won't even let her come to the wedding. Would you be willing to come and be the friend's bridesmaid? And that is how I was a bridesmaid on short notice in a teenage wedding. And I forgot until now that the year before, I had gone to a wedding of another friend and went to the reception that was somebody's grandma's house way the hell out in the country, and I didn't know where we were. So the bride and groom drove me home in the car that someone had decorated for them, with the cans tied to the bumper and everything. My mom heard us coming a block away and came outside to see me get out of the car and just shook her head. But the real WTF, teenage wedding? So picture it, rural Kentucky, summer of 1992, hot, humid, ripe for bad decisions. My friend had invited me to her wedding. She is 16, I am 17. Her boyfriend is, doing mental math, 20. So her mom wants grandbabies. And they decided, fueled by liquor and weed, and by they I mean her and her boyfriend and her mom, he was sleeping with both of them, that it would be a great idea to marry them off. Mom gets her grandbabies, friend gets her wedding, boyfriend, he gets I don't know what. Anyway, the wedding is in her mom's newly redone backyard where she has a pool and a koi pond and tiki torches. Both bride and groom were drunk. So was her mom. I ended up sitting with another friend and going to the movies afterwards with him. We did not partake in the drinking and smoking of herbs, but plenty of others did. We did, however, get eaten alive by mosquitoes. And that, y'all, is the teenage weddings I went to while still in high school. So our next story is coming from r/entitled people, posted by user Not a Robot, Def a Cyborg. Try to stiff me? I'll let my mom straighten you out. I was about 10 years old when this happened, so some recollections might not be 100%. Anyway, picture it. Northern New England, 1977. First really big snowfall of the winter. At least 8 inches on the ground. Everyone needed their walk shoveled. All the neighborhood boys were out with their dad's big metal shovels, carving up the sidewalks. Me? I saw an opportunity to pocket a little extra money. With my parents' permission, and only because we knew everyone on the street pretty well, with a few exceptions, I went out to join the shoveling brigade. Most of the good houses were taken by the time I set out, but one neighbor hadn't been touched yet. They were older and probably early 70s. He'd just gotten out of the hospital, so shoveling was right out. His wife was, as a side, well, she was tall, and I couldn't picture her bundling up and swinging a shovel to save her life. Also, she was, kind of a jerk to all of his kids, which is why I should have known better than to approach them for a shoveling gig. Note: I absolutely loathe shoveling, but I'm really good at it, LOL. And so these old farts got their sidewalks, plural, all around their house cleared. I'd shoveled their driveway, cleared off their cars, and shoveled that snow anyway. They had a walkway from the house to the street, to the garage, and all around the back of the house. And I even shoveled out their basement steps. And then they stiffed me. We had agreed on $5 for the walkways and another $5 for the cars and the driveway. It was 1977, LOL. When I was done, I knocked on the front door as I'd been asked to. The wife came out with a smirk on her face, handed me an envelope, and being a polite kid, I just said, thanks, have a nice day. I went home, didn't even open the envelope until that night, and she paid me $3. I was so mad, I just started bawling. My parents knew her and her husband, and if it hadn't been for the fact that I opened the envelope right in front of my mom, she never believed that her friend would cheat a child. Did I get the rest of my money? Yeah, I did. Did my mother wrap herself up all 5 feet 2 inches of her and walk 3 houses down and yell at this woman that she was a thief and a horrible person? And how could she do that to a kid who was trying to make a little extra pocket money? Also, yes. I'd never had her stand up for me like that before. Felt good. The next story on this episode is coming from r/neighbors from hell, posted by Code Mud Key. Neighbor's dog is constantly coming to my property, and my neighbor thinks he has no responsibility to come get it to leave. So, my neighbor lives about a football field away from my house. He owns 2 dogs that he lets roam around the neighborhood. One is a very quiet dog that does not really cause a ruckus. And the other is a dog that loves to literally sit on my front yard and bark relentlessly at my dogs through the window or at my horses. It also has, on multiple occasions, come running up to me on my own property and just start barking at me. Whatever, it's a dumb dog. It's a nuisance, but I do not fear it. So last night, around 9:45, the dog came wandering to my front lawn and just kept relentlessly barking at my horses, getting them worked up and making my dogs go crazy. At about 10:05 p.m., I texted my neighbor if he could do me a favor and come get the dog because of the aforementioned ruckus. This isn't the first time I have had to ask him to come get the dog off my property. My wife went out to lock up the chickens, and about 5 minutes later, heard this man from his house screaming at our home that a line had been drawn and that we should call the cops and that he won't chain up his dog. He was screaming for about a half hour from his house, more or less into the ether, how we should move to the city, blah, blah, blah. I also checked my phone, and he had sent a text that he later withdrew, so I did not get to see what it actually said. I lost all respect for this man. He obviously was drunk and doing this in front of his family. Moreover, it demonstrates to me that he is a man-child. I think it is perfectly reasonable that if you ask politely and calmly to be responsible for your animal, it makes sense that you do so, especially since everyone affords you the courtesy of not making it a huge deal. Your animals are wandering all over their property. Hell, last year this dog killed one of my chickens, and I didn't even get mad. I just asked the guy to keep a closer eye since things happen. Let me know your thoughts, please. The next story is coming from r/petty revenge, posted by user InnerSavings2964. Petty revenge against a group of entitled people. This takes place back in 1971. It was Christmas Eve, and I was 18 working with a friend. I had just graduated high school that year. We worked in a gas station pumping gas in New Jersey. It had been snowing all day, and there was about 4 inches or more on the ground. The station was on US Route 46 westbound, about 10 miles from New York City. This is a 2-lane road in each direction with a simple metal grid rail separating the east and west lanes. The owner of the station said we were not to do service calls as he was not insured for it. So around 8 p.m., we see this guy crossing the eastbound lanes, hop the guardrail, and walk into the station. The guy was dressed in very nice clothes. He told us he had a flat and asked if we could fix it for him. My friend Mark said we were not allowed to leave the station. The guy started to beg us to please help them as they had a Christmas party to get to in New York City. I asked Mark if we should go help the guy, and Mark said if you want to do it, then go ahead. I asked him how much to charge, and he said $5, so the guy agreed. And I threw a floor jack in my trunk, and we went over to his car. It was right across the highway in the entrance to a large car dealership. When I got out of the car, there were 5 of the people. They were there, all dressed in fine outfits. They reeked money. It was 3 couples. One woman started saying things like, "Thank you, you're a lifesaver," and such. One of the men said something I did not quite understand to one who came to the station. He said, "How much?" The guy replied, "Afinsky." Now, I had never heard this word, but I knew that Finn was slang for 5, so I assumed that's what he was referring to. Well, then it happened. They stopped conversing in English and switched to German. This is where it gets interesting. As I mentioned, I graduated high school about 6 months earlier, after having had 4 years of B-level German. So I understood quite a bit of what they were saying. Basically, the conversation went like, "This is crazy. It's too much. You could go down the street and pay half that much." Now, you might say, why are they complaining about $5? I just looked it up, and $5 in 1971 is over $38 today. So yes, for that time, it was expensive. So I keep my mouth shut, do my work, just listening to the conversation. I did not know any German curse words, which was good for them because I would have stopped and left them there on the spot. I finished changing the tire, put everything away, and they're still jabbering in German. I had decided what to do and very politely tapped the guy on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, but can I have my $5 now?" in German. That resulted in complete silence from all of them. 6 people stared at me in shock. And it was like you could see them shrink into themselves as they realized I understood what they were saying. The woman who said, "You're a lifesaver" in English, "Oh, you understand German," she said. I replied to her in German saying, "Yes, I do." I could tell they were all very flustered about it. She asked me in English how to get to New York City, and I gave her the directions in German. I wanted to twist the knife, so to speak, to push home how much German I understood. They paid me as they were driving away. The woman was sitting in the back seat looking out the window staring at me as they drove away. I was on cloud 9. I felt like I was hovering above the ground. I just cut 6 snooty, entitled people at the knees and did it by being polite with a smile on my face. It was glorious. All right, another story from r/petty revenge coming from user Lizard81288. Truck driver wanted to be a jerk, so we gave him a taste of his own medicine. This happened last summer when my girlfriend and I were driving back from her sister's house. It was a long drive, and since we left late at night, we ended up on the toll roads around 1 or 2 in the morning. At first, we noticed flashes of light in the distance and assumed it was heat lightning, since it was summer, so we didn't think much of it. A little while later, we got behind a semi-truck on a 2-lane road. When we switched lanes to pass him, everything seemed fine, until he moved behind us and started flashing his bright lights at us non-stop. That's when we realized that the heat lightning we had been seeing was actually this guy flashing his brights at every car in front of him. On top of that, he started honking at us. Stunned, we switched lanes to let him pass. And as we did, he flicked us off. At that point, my girlfriend decided to stay behind him because she didn't want to drive next to him. As we continued driving, he did the same thing to another car. After a few minutes, I joked that we should give him a taste of his own medicine. My girlfriend said, "Yeah," and she started flashing her lights at him, honking, and then sped past him. I even flicked him off. By the time he realized what was happening, we were already far ahead. He tried to catch up, but his truck just didn't have the speed. We couldn't stop laughing. We never figured out why he was doing it, but blinding people at night like that was just dumb and dangerous. He wasn't trapped in traffic or anything. He was just being a jerk. So in the end, we got our petty revenge and had a good laugh all the way home. Our final story in this episode is coming from r/petty revenge. We're going to wrap it up here. And the story is posted by user YokeDN. Overbearing mother-in-law wants to guilt trip my wife and mess with our home. Absolutely not. My wife's mother did something years ago that I haven't forgiven her for, and I'm never letting this grudge die. When my wife and I first met her, her mother was used to being very involved in her life. She had a key to her apartment, which quickly became our apartment. She was used to seeing her at least once a week. She was used to bossing my wife around like she was still a child, despite my wife being well into her late 20s. All of that classic overbearing codependency mother stuff was taken care of with a lot of therapy and hefty boundaries, which made life a lot easier for me, much to the dismay of my mother-in-law, who was no longer getting her way. I noticed she started to make some comments about our home, how she hopes nothing goes wrong because she won't be able to come in and help us without a key anymore. LOL. Or how if she was involved in choosing what colors to paint our apartment walls, it would match better. Little rude passive-aggressive things like that. The last straw for me, where I really decided I just couldn't handle this passive-aggressive entitled crap anymore, was when she came into our apartment, when my wife and I were exhausted from a week of work and didn't really feel like entertaining. But her mom guilted her into hosting, and then my mother-in-law used our toilet and turned the orientation of the toilet paper. What kind of self-important person comes into someone else's home and changes their toilet paper orientation? So anyway, this was almost 15 years ago, and every single time we were invited into their home after that, which was way too often, I changed every single toilet paper orientation in their house, all 3 bathrooms. She's never brought it up with either of us, and she's never touched our toilet paper orientation ever again since that day, but I'll never stop. I hope she knows it's me, and that she's gonna be fixing her toilet paper orientation for the rest of her life, as long as she wants to be a menace in my wife's and my life. So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince, and we'll see you next time here on The RR Show.